My name is Sameea Kazmi, and I'm an attorney with Community Legal Aid. And this morning I'm actually going to be reading the testimony of a client of mine, Melissa DiSantos, who could not be here today. But she asked me to read her testimony on her behalf, so I will also be reading this in her voice. My name is Melissa DiSantos, and I'm a mother of 3 young children, ages 5, 4, and 18 months. I became homeless in December 2011 when I had to leave my husband because of domestic violence. Since then, my children and I have not had stable housing, and we have had to live with my father, my grandmother, and a friend before we exhausted all options and finally ended up in a local hospital emergency room. I have had to leave my friend's house after my 4-year-old daughter was punched and bruised, and after my 18-month-old daughter was thrown across the room by an adult guest of the friend with whom I was staying. We could no longer stay with my grandmother because she has suffered a stroke. My father kicked us out of his apartment because he lives in a 1-bedroom apartment, and his landlord has threatened to evict him if my children and I continue to stay with him. I applied for emergency assistance shelter benefits in Worcester sometime around September 20th, and I was denied. The DHCD worker told me, "You are not homeless. Please tell your father to get a bigger place." She did not give me a written denial notice. Then on Sunday, September 30th, my father kicked me and my children out of his apartment. I initially went to the Webster Police Department, where they tried to help me find a homeless shelter where my children and I could stay. When they were not successful, they arranged for me to go to UMass Memorial Hospital's emergency room. My children and I spent the night of September 30th at the UMass Memorial Hospital's emergency room. On the morning of Monday, October 1st, I went over to the Worcester DHCD office to apply for EA shelter benefits again. I was told by the DHCD worker in an intimidating and threatening tone that she was going to call DCF. When I asked the DHCD worker if DCF was going to take my children away because I was homeless and seeking help, she told me she did not know whether DCF was going to take my children away. I then contacted Legal Services, who contacted the DHCD office in Boston and helped me to be placed in EA shelter. However, my application has still not been approved. They told me we could stay for only 30 days unless I provide additional proof. I have had to provide documentation verifying that my children and I spent the night at UMass Memorial Hospital's emergency room. This has been very difficult, for my children are very young and I don't have a car. I have had to call different departments at the hospital only to get voicemail. I did not realize, after spending an entire night in the hospital emergency room with 3 young children, because I had no place to go, that I would need a note to prove this. We did not go to the hospital emergency room to become eligible for shelter. We went there because we had nowhere to go, and the police sent us there. This entire process has been extremely stressful and demeaning. Please change the rules so that others do not have to experience what my children and I have had to experience. Thank you. I actually have my own statement also. I'd like to read that as well.
In 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. As I mentioned, my name is Sameea Kazmi, and I'm an attorney with Community Legal Aid, and I work with homeless families. And in my position, I represent homeless families who are seeking and who have been denied emergency assistance shelter benefits. I'm here today to testify about my work with homeless families over the last several weeks and to tell you about their experiences, as many of those families could not be here today for various reasons, including lack of reliable child care and lack of transportation. One woman could not be here today because she is in the late stages of her pregnancy, and another family has been so discouraged and distraught by this process that they did not want to be involved. I'm deeply concerned both by the restrictiveness of the new regulations and in the way they are being implemented by DHCD. I can tell you that several families that I've spoken with over the last few weeks have told me that they were not even allowed to fill out an application when they went to DHCD. One father told me that when he went to DHCD, the worker told his family, "Why do you want to fill out an application? You know we are just going to call DCF." The father told me that he and his family had absolutely no place to go, so he went back to DHCD a few days later, and he told the DHCD worker, that she could call DCF and that he and his wife were not concerned because they didn't abuse their children and they really had absolutely no place to go. The father said at this time the DHCD worker refused to take their application. I have spoken with other families who have told me that even if they have been allowed to fill out an application, they've been verbally denied. They're not given a written denial notice, and so they don't have any way of appealing their application, appealing the denial of their application. Our office is currently working with a mother of a 3-year-old who is currently in her late stages of pregnancy, and she became homeless after losing her job because her place of employment went out of business. She and her 3-year-old have been couch surfing ever since, staying with various families and friends until they finally wore out their welcome and could no longer stay with their family or friends. She applied for EA shelter 3 times, only to be denied without any written denial notice. She was told she did not qualify because she had a place to go. She was denied because the new regulations require that a family stay in a place not meant for human habitation before becoming eligible. She then got in contact with our office and was placed presumptively late last Friday afternoon. Okay, I'm almost done. Another family that I'm working with, as I mentioned before, was kicked out of our family member's place, and she spent the night in the police station and a hospital emergency room. They had been denied shelter because the new regulations require that families stay in a place not meant for human habitation before becoming eligible for shelter. She was eventually placed after I had a number of communications with both the local and central DHCD staff. Families have also complained to me about their treatment by the DHCD workers during the application process. So I'm here today to ask you to change the EA regulations and to provide eligibility for those at imminent risk of having to stay in an unsafe place, and also to change the practices in the local offices so that families do not have to experience what many families that I have mentioned here today have had to experience. Thank you.